Ana Laura, or Ana Laura, depending on the pronunciation. And the idea of this webinar is for me to share a little bit about my experience from, when I started freelancing, and then how that moved on to creating my own agency in the Salesforce kind of like industry. And what are the things that were kind of like super good for me to know at the beginning? What are the things that I've done to kind of like launch my business? I think I know there's people that I worked with in the past. We have some freelancers here in the room as well, and consultants. So I think you all know that it's been a super hard year for a lot of us, a lot of people. And I think there are a lot of things that I think I kind of like, I had some challenges as well that I learned how to navigate them. And I think if I can share that and can be helpful to others, then that's great. So the questions that I will address, and then this is kind of like the structure of the presentation, but then we can open it to more questions or exchange of ideas, are the ones listed here. So how to find your niche, which is kind of like a very tricky one. How to start landing clients. What are the pros and cons of being a remote worker? I'm sure you already know that. But when I mean remote worker, I also mean like freelancer or independent worker, right? And then how to join the Salesforce market in Europe. And again, I guess this is not just in Europe, but also like how to join the Salesforce market in general, or how that works. If you already work in the Salesforce industry, you kind of like probably have a good idea of that. And I can also share some tips on that as well. So yeah, feel free to interrupt. I'm just looking at my screen now. So if you have any questions, feel free to just like unmute yourself. All right. So a little bit about my experience. You saw me on video, but that's me on the picture. And my experience throughout my career was always working at big companies like Accenture, Comscore, and Standard, which is also called AppNexus and was acquired recently by AT&T. So I had a kind of like experience in consulting, but also in the advertising technology industry. And my entire career, I was a marketer. So I worked as a head of marketing for Latin America and Europe at Comscore, and then for international marketing at Standard, which is AppNexus. And the one thing that I was really focused on was lead generation for B2B. So that was kind of like my main expertise in terms of the kind of like the main focus. But then in terms of like the work itself, I would work a lot with Pardot at the very beginning. Then I moved on to work with Eloqua, which you might know is a solution from Oracle. And then I always kind of like was focused on that and very interested in that as well. One day I was living in London, and I was like, it wasn't one day. I thought about it. There was a thinking process behind it, but I decided to take a break because I wasn't very kind of like happy with my work life. Not because I was like unhappy and sad, but mostly because I think I was kind of like looking for something else in my career, like a bigger challenge, I guess. But I wasn't sure about what I wanted. So I'm very grateful because at the time I had time and resources to take some time off, and that actually didn't work because as soon as I decided to take some time off, I landed a client by accident. So I said, yeah, perhaps I'll do some freelancing. And then I ended up working for a tech startup. And that allowed me to, travel. I lived in Indonesia for a little, and then Costa Rica. And I met a lot of people doing different things like, Salesforce consulting, or they will have their own online business. So that gave me another perspective into like, it's possible to have your own business. For me, to be completely honest, my mentality at the time was like, well, I'll just like work in a company, which is completely fine. But that was the only option for me at the time. So I think I really appreciate having the opportunity to being able to see a different perspective or something else that would work for me at the time. And then the interesting part, I'll say, is like how did I end up like creating my agency, right? And then the clients that are listed there, the companies that I work with and I'm working with at the moment. But basically, I guess I'll share a bit about the learning process there, but or the kind of the process itself. But it was a lot of trial and error, and it was a lot of like, kind of like going with the flow. So what I do mainly, or we do at the agency, is like growing your funnel, like growing a funnel of a company that needs more leads. So similarly to what I was doing in the past for lead gen. So what are the things that we can do to create more leads for a company? Then how can we increase the conversions? And for that, there's a lot of like tech stack optimization and nurturing funnels and all the like kind of like marketing automation bits. And then how can we prove campaign ROI, which is my favorite part. And it's, how can we use the analytics we have? How can we measure offline conversions? How can we make sure we match ads with performance and results? So,
Anna, excuse me, may I just interrupt you very quickly just to understand? So, as for me also, maybe for others, not very clear. So you lived in England, so you were an employee. Then you decided to create your company to work as a freelancer. So how you found your first client actually? You told me that you told us that it's a startup, or what was, how did you find it?
It's a good question. Actually, I got a phone call from an ex-boss, and she said that her husband was launching a tech company, and he was kind of like looking for someone that could help him put together the communications and stuff like that and the website. So that was the main thing. But it was a lot of kind of like the network I had that I wasn't even aware that I had that network because I didn't need it in a way before. So yeah, that's a very good question. I don't know if I answered the question.
So you didn't have a presentation, website,
no.
or anything. You just started to proposing your services, right?
Correct. Yeah, I had absolutely nothing. I didn't even have a website back in the day. I don't recommend this, but yeah, that was the case.
Okay. Thank you.
Of course. Yeah. So again, and I was a freelancer for a year and a half, I'll say. And then when I started to grow my kind of like services, or in a way, I kind of like the demand started to grow. I realized, well, I mean, I need more people. I don't have these skills. I don't have these tech skills. I'll need to hire more people so that I can build this. So the agency is kind of a result of what I was doing as a freelancer. So I didn't know I was going this direction, to be honest. And then I realized, I actually want this, and I kind of like, I want to create this company. But it's not that from day one I was like, yes, I'm going to do this. It's kind of like, that was a flow that I was taking. I knew I wanted to work remotely. I knew I wanted to be a freelancer and consultant and help companies, but I didn't know exactly in what shape. So you probably are like, okay, so you said you were going to talk about your niche. So what is your niche? So the main thing I'm focusing my efforts on, and my efforts are commercial and marketing efforts, is Pardot. So, and mainly for B2B companies, I would say. So in B2B companies, I would say more like tech companies and education companies as well. Why? Because that's, throughout my experience, that's what I found that, one, I have connections there. And the second thing is like, that's the kind of like experience I got to build my portfolio, right? Because based on the previous slide, you'll see, okay, these are all the things that you're offering, which kind of like makes sense, from lead generation to conversion. But the reality is like, I'm focusing on one niche. If I have extra opportunities that I can take because I have enough time and it's a project that is interesting, then for sure I will take it. But I think the main thing is that I won't put a lot of like marketing or commercial efforts into something that is not the niche I mentioned, right? So in that sense, I do believe that specialization lets you scale a lot. Why? Because, you start getting better at something, you develop a lot more case studies, you can develop a lot more like connections within, a certain industry. And then believe me, like referrals are the one thing that worked for me. And I'll tell you a bit more about this, but like, I don't know. And I would love to hear more about other people here as well, like how you're landing clients or how is it working for you. But for me, it's 100% referrals. So if I know that, based on the kind of like business model I've developed, referrals are important, then I definitely want to be like an expert in my field. Because if I'm not, it's hard for me to get people to, recommend me to other
Let me interrupt you again,
clients.
Anna, because maybe for some people they don't really know what do you mean by referrals, firstly, and secondly, so your niche you choose because it was your specialization. But now you're talking about persona, right? Because there are particular companies you decided to specialize, and how these companies also accept remote work, because, for example, for me, I was prospected in France, and for France, remote is something sort of taboo. Only for small projects they accept. But the majority, for example, of clients I receive demands today for Salesforce Network, they're not coming from French clients. So two questions: the persona, so the niche, because there is your specialization, but also this niche, and how you deal with objection about remote work if you have.
Yeah, definitely. That's a very good question. I think in terms of like the persona, I haven't done like super expensive development of who is my buyer persona. I know for me, especially, is from marketing managers for big companies to CMOs or VP of marketing in bigger companies. And in that sense is, and I will show you a little bit on the next slide, but it's kind of like the process I follow to end up with this kind of like buyer persona or this niche in a sense, which is not like a super specific or targeted niche, but it's what's working for me, right? For referrals, what I mean is basically, people that are willing to recommend you for a specific task or work. So I had referrals from clients, like current clients, that would say, I met this person at that event. They asked me how we were doing marketing automation with Pardot, and I told them that you were helping us as a consultant, so they want to talk to you. And then through them, I got a new client. One thing that I'm very interested in developing is a referral kind of like program. So how can I reach out to current customers or past customers and in a way ask them, hey, this is my new like updated deck. If you're interested, can I use a testimonial from you? And of course, if you think there are any other potential like clients that will benefit from my services, please let them know. I'm happy to offer you a discount on our monthly retainer or something like that. So that's the second answering the second question. And I think what you mentioned about remote work, I know the challenge was big for me from a freelancing point of view. From an agency point of view, I haven't had that challenge my clients are not based in Portugal. So I do have a Portuguese client, but in general, my clients are outside of Portugal, and that probably has to do with my experience and people I met in the past. But in general, like they know when they're working with me, we're working, over the internet. But yes, I do believe there's some challenges when it comes to working remotely as an employee, especially if there's a company that already has an office in place. They will want that person there on site. I found ways to kind of like convince clients. For instance, I think it was early this year that I was working on a project for a company based in Spain, and they wanted a training on site. So I mentioned, look, most of the trainings I do them online. I can offer this and that, and kind of like convince them to have an online experience, which will be as good as like an on-site one that will probably be more expensive for the client as well. Mm-hmm. So I think it's like it depends on each case, but to be honest, like with the episodes during this year, I think more and more companies are aware that it's kind of like okay to have someone working remotely. As long as you're very good with communication and you're always on top of everything, it should be completely fine. But yeah, so it hasn't been that big of a challenge yet. But yeah, I know from a freelancing point of view, it's kind of hard. So in terms of how did I get there, or how did I end up like finding that niche? This will sound super simple, but I kind of like I think it's important to actually either write down the items on like your list that has to do with your experience, or you know, like think about them, talk to ex-colleagues or friends about it. But you know, really knowing what's your experience and really knowing what you're good at will kind of like help you in a way identify what are the things that you can do to put together a kind of like an offering for companies. Because I don't know, like, you know, you might think you're I don't know, you can you're good at something, or you might think you're not good at something, and then you have tons of experience on that. So doing that exercise of writing down the 5 things that you're like, okay, I'm going to focus on this is really good. I think trying to do something that you like to do, but you haven't really worked on, it's not that great. It's not going to, I mean, it can work. It's amazing. But it's not like if you want to take the shortcut, just focus on the experience you already have and the connections you have. So, you know, as I mentioned before, in my niche, I said, okay, tech companies, B2B, ad tech, that's the kind of like the network I have. And leveraging your network is the best thing you can do, because as you might have heard, like it's like when you're trying to sell your services, you have to leverage the contacts you already have and the people that know what you do, because you never know when there might be an opportunity and they might kind of like recommend you to a friend or to someone launching a new company, or to, I don't know, a CMO at a larger business as well. So going through that exercise, kind of like checking at my experience, checking at the connections I already have. And then, as I mentioned, it's like a little bit of trial and error. Like at the beginning, I kind of like, you know, I have a lot of experience writing content. I've done that in the past a lot. And I kind of like wanted to focus a lot on that. But to be honest, there's a lot of competition there, which is great, because if you really focus on that, you can really do it. But I didn't want to just like do writing, you know, just content. And I was like, okay, if I'm going to specialize on something, why, like, you know, for me, Pardot and working on marketing automation kind of like services, it opens like a lot more doors, because I can, on top of that, say, well, if you need an email marketing campaign, I can work on it. If you need a copy for the landing page, I can. So that will be kind of like a way to cross-sell, or, you know, like add an additional item for the client. But always focusing on the one thing that can, first of all, land kind of like bigger clients for me, and also long-term projects rather than a one-off thing.
So your clients your clients, you told that they are not in Portugal. So from which country they are? And we have a lot of French-speaking also participants. So for them also it's important. It was the question I received also from other countries. People ask if we are not a native English speaker, is it possible for us to get any remote freelance projects? So from where are your clients?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, from the UK, that's one of the countries, because I work there. So I do have UK clients. I also have clients based in the United States. And then I don't know, I didn't mention this, but I'm from Argentina. So I'm not a native English speaker myself. So yeah, there are plenty of opportunities, especially if you're not working, I mean, on, I don't know, like something that requires you to be like super specific on your English pronunciation, then I don't think there should be an issue. I think though developing like a network and connections in the UK or the US is kind of like important. And I can talk about that when it comes to like landing clients and that section. But I think it kind of it doesn't really have to do with your, I mean, it has to do with your language in a sense. But for instance, I guess for me, it will be harder to try to get clients in France, than from a French person to try to land clients in the UK. I might be wrong, but that's kind of like the theory I have. But yeah, not being a native English speaker hasn't really affected the way I kind of like I acquired kind of like new clients in that sense. All right, so yeah, so moving on to the next slide, that's like about like landing clients, and I have to say this has been my biggest challenge. I don't know if we have any business development salespersons in the call, but for me, I was not I am not a salesperson, although I do that at the agency. So for me, it has been the biggest challenge. I started with referrals, and now I'm trying to move on to kind of like onto a new structure where I can sell not online, but kind of like expand my network, expand my kind of like sales outside of my current network. So, you know, how can I do that? The first thing I realized, and it was kind of like the biggest challenge this year as well, I think I have to say I'm bad at a lot of things, but the one thing I realized is like I can actually make connections. I'm good at networking, you know, I'm open to meeting new people. That's something that I can do well. Okay, so how can I do this? For me, in the past, it has been about like going to events, like industry events, talking to people that I don't know, like if I'm meeting people at a co-working space, I'll talk about what I do, blah, blah, blah. So it was kind of like in-person like connections. This year that has been like super hard. So how can I get exposure about what I do? One of the things that I've done in the past and I've been doing lately, I kind of like, I think about, okay, where are my potential clients? What are they, you know, and how can I reach them? So what are they reading? Which events, online events are they attending to? Who are they talking to? There's one thing, and this is related to connections as well. There's one thing that you know, LinkedIn, we all use it. It's really good. I think posting on LinkedIn is sometimes hard for me in a way to kind of like try to like keep people like informed about what I do and top of mind and remind them, hey, this is what I do. But also, I think in terms of connections, it's actually quite good. There's an option in LinkedIn that you can download all your data. I can share the link after the call, or you can send me an email and I can share it with you all. But you can export all of your personal data from LinkedIn. And that means that you can get access to not all the email addresses from your connections, but you can have email addresses from your connections that have kind of like allowed that on the privacy settings, I guess. So I do have a lot of connections. I do have a lot of email addresses, and I'm with the people that I think might be good to connect. I can send them a personal email. Of course, you're not going to spam your entire kind of like network. But if you don't want to send a message through LinkedIn and you want to connect with someone, you can do that as well. It's actually quite good to take a look at everything that's on the LinkedIn, kind of like on your personal information on LinkedIn. But I think in that sense, for me, is I don't know if you've used if you all have used in the past tools like, you know, Upwork and all of these tools out there. For me, they never worked. There's one tool only that I think sometimes I made some connections through that. And I'm, you know, if they work for some other people, that's amazing. For me, they haven't really worked. Perhaps I didn't put enough effort. But for me, what really, really worked in the past is, you know, showing what I do and how can I do it. And that with social proof, that's amazing. So if I worked on something and I have a case study, I have a blog post, or I have something that I can share that will help me, one, with my SEO on my website, two, with my exposure, because I can post it on LinkedIn and post it on all like different, like on my newsletter, whatever. And then three, with connections to continue to keep me informed about what I do, then for me, that's great. Because that's the way it worked for me. And it's kind of like it worked for some other people. If there are other methods, I'm very happy to get advice. And actually, I'm kind of like joining an agency network every month for discussion. I'm also kind of like very active on all the Salesforce groups and Trade Hub as well. And any group that I find on LinkedIn that might help me when it comes to like connecting with people as well. So it's a lot of kind of like extra work in that sense, but it's really good in terms of like kind of like landing clients when you're not selling like you're selling your own services. So yeah, that's kind of like those are kind of like the lessons learned I had from how to acquire new clients.
Yeah, just wanted to
make
add
sure.
from my side also, when I decided to create the Salesforce network, I also tried Upwork, people per hour, and mass prospecting on LinkedIn, which didn't work at all. And then I decided, well, how did I found my first contract? And it was networking, and that's why actually the concept was born, to connect people. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, and even these kind of webinars, they're really good because we all kind of like have something in common. If it's not like the industry, because it's Salesforce, it's like working online remotely, freelancing, thinking about launching your own business as well. So yeah, I think this event as well, these kind of things are the ones that I love putting a bit of effort into, because these are the kind of things that will help me make new connections for sure. So yeah, completely agree. Not that Upwork doesn't work at all, because it does. And I know a lot of people that find clients through Upwork, but more like kind of like sharing, what I thought it would work and it actually didn't really work for me in the past. And then talking about remote work, and of course the picture is just to like picture something that is not the reality, or at least for me lately. So, while working remotely, we all know what is to work remotely, because we're all working actually remotely during these times. I think when it comes to kind of like working as a freelancer and working on your own, when if you need to log in hours, or like, like if your income depends on the work that you do, and how actually you develop that work, how you spend time like doing networking and stuff like that, is for me super important to kind of like have that discipline, have the tools in terms of like productivity to make sure I know where I'm like actually spending time. What am I doing with my time? So for instance, I use Clockify for some of the projects for clients, and Clockify is a tool where you can kind of like measure time and assign that time to projects. And Clockify is something that, I use for kind of like clients and managing like relationship with clients. And if I'm charging them by the hour, then I have that as a tool. Then I use Clockify for my work, for work that I use, like I do for the agency, so that I know, okay, am I not generating new leads this month? Okay, how many hours have I worked this month for lead gen? Am I actually using like time wisely? If I go and check the dashboard and I'm like, okay, but this week I worked like, I don't know, X amount of hours on this and not that, so it's not really good. I'm not putting enough like amount of effort into something that I really want to develop, right? So perhaps it's very simple, but for me it actually really helps. There's another tool called Cuckoo, and I can send everything via email, but that's something I've used in the past as well, because it's based on the Pomodoro technique that you might have heard or not, but it's kind of like proven that people can work very focused on kind of like sprints of 25 minutes. So it will like let you know when you need to have a 5-minute break when it's been like 25 minutes. So these are the things I use. I honestly struggled a little bit to work on my own and to kind of like get organized when you don't have clients online that they need to talk to you all the time. Your work week can be, I don't know, Sunday, Saturday, 10 p.m. till 3 a.m. So it happened to me in the past that I honestly didn't know which day of the week it was, because I wasn't working on like with clients that needed my help. And this is when I was a freelancer, that needed my help or needed me to be online all the time. So it was challenging for me, because I felt like, I was kind of like losing direction. So yeah, these are the things that I think are really important. And in terms of like, as I mentioned before, having a reminder, the way you need to communicate not only to clients, because you're working remotely, you're not sitting down with them. So you need to make that extra effort using, try to join their Slack channels. I ask for that all the time, when I'm working with a new client, or, there's never enough communication. So if you need to send 2,000 emails, that's great. But then communication also for people that are not seeing you in person. So how can you make sure, and again, what are the tools that you need to use to be on top of mind? So sharing updates on LinkedIn, sharing what you do on your blog, on your newsletter, and maintain people informed, so that if there's any opportunity, that's the network of people that can probably recommend you to other people. So make sure you're not just like keeping things inside of your kind of like circle of people, but also that like eventually you make it to people that you don't know that are connections to your own network.
So do you use it, for example, when you speak with clients, for example, who don't want to imagine that you work remotely, do you use it, you're telling that I communicate through these tools, we will send all these tools by email later. So you say you can see the exact number of hours I work, so you can follow. Because for people who don't accept remote work, it's also a lot about the management. They want to see you in the office working there, and they don't know how to manage it. They don't know how to follow your work exactly. So do you use these arguments?
Yeah, I think, well, I always share my reports with Clockify with my clients, but mostly because with some of them, some projects are by the hour. In terms of work and being like present, I always join to ask whatever tool they're using. So I kind of like adapt and I say, look, do you use Slack? Can I join your Slack channels? Or can we create a Slack channel for Pardot? And then sometimes they ask me to, actually one of my clients, they're really good at tracking projects and like tickets and everything. And I joined their software, so they created an account for me so that I can like give updates of everything I do. I think the easier way will be, if you're working on projects, I think that's great, because then the client I will expect that the client will want you to deliver the project, and as long as you deliver that, it's okay wherever you are and however you do it. But I think that might be a good idea, actually, just like in terms of like landing more work, offering, on the kind of like the discussions, the kind of like negotiation or whatever discussion. So like, this is how I work and how I work remotely with my agency or as a freelancer as well. So that they know upfront that they can get a lot of control in a way of how you're spending your time.
Okay. Anyone have any questions by now, or no?
Okay. And then to mention a little bit about Salesforce or Pardot market in Europe. And this is not only in Europe, I believe it's not that different in the US or, the Americas or APAC. I think if you're a freelancer or if you're trying to start like working in the Salesforce industry, I'll say most of the times you have three options. You can be just an independent consultant or a freelancer. You can join an independent agency, or you can join one of the larger kind of like Salesforce partners as a freelancer, right? I would say that the one thing that really helped me is, understanding how the industry works and what are the kind of like the things that what's the experience I have and what are the things that I should be offering in that sense, and how can I position that. The one thing that I was going to mention is that if you don't have a lot of experience as a user with Salesforce or Pardot, and I think Carolina can talk a lot about this a lot more than me, but I think it's kind of like a bit more challenging because, as you know, it's kind of like hard to get your hands on the tool if you don't have don't have access to it. So it's not that you can practice on your own and stuff like that. You could join a lot of different courses for sure. There's also a very good podcast that I used to listen to about Salesforce careers. And in that podcast, there's a lot of people that are being interviewed about how they migrated from their corporate role from, I don't know, being a marketing person into being a consultant, product consultant, for instance, or how they created their own agency as well. And in that podcast really helped me a lot to understand, okay, what are the different things that I can kind of like do. There's also a lot of discussion whether you should keep your credentials updated or not, and if you really need the credentials or not. And that depends on how every person sees that and what the clients request from you as well. But in general, I would say this is kind of like how the market is organized. And again, I think if you need more, kind of like if you want more advice on how, if you are thinking about taking the next step or actually expanding into like growing or getting like setting up your own agency as well, I'll definitely recommend the podcast, or also like joining the Salesforce Network, talking to Carolina. She has a lot of experience as well. So yeah, that's kind of like my take on this one. So I think we can open it now for questions. I have some resources to share. So if you want to connect with me, you can send me an email. You can also write down your email on the chat so that we can connect. I can send you an email as well. I usually write a lot on Pardot, marketing automation, and advertising in general on the blog post. So you can sign up to receive our news as well if you're interested. And if you're interested to have a one-on-one conversation about what we discussed during the webinar, feel free to reach out. We can have an informal chat and exchange some ideas as well. So yeah, that's everything. I wanted to know if anyone has questions or anything to share.
No questions. Everything is clear. No?
Hi, Anna. Maybe I think I do have a question.
Yes.
How did you determine pricing for the services?
Well, that's a very good question, actually.
Yeah, I was wondering how you determine, like, if you're working on a hour-by-hour project, how do you determine how many hours you'll work on that project, and then how much you'll charge the client for the project?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think it took me a while to learn that. First of all, I think there's a lot of calculators out there, and I can share some with you. I think what is, and that's if you're being a freelancer and if you already have your service, like, you know what you're going to sell. So, then it's easier to monetize in a way. But there's the way I do it, at least, I know my hourly fee. So if I have a new project, I can offer, if I can package that project in a way, I would say, well, and imagine it's a one-off project, I would say, okay, for this project, this is how much I'm charging. And the way I estimate that is by my hourly rate, right? That's one option. The second option is charging by the hour. So I say, well, this is how much I charge X amount of hours. And I, for instance, my one recommendation, I don't know if you all do it, but what I do is like, I always try to have at least a 3-month contract, or a contract that allows me to kind of like, charge in a way, because usually when you land a new client, you need to do a lot of research. You need to start like learning a lot of other tools, the way they work and everything. And having a one-off project for like 3 days, sometimes it's not worth it. So what I would say is like, always try to have either a retainer or this like kind of like minimum amount of hours that you charge for. You can do a lot of research online, but I think based on your current salary, you can estimate that, but make sure you consider, if you're going freelance, like moving on to freelancer, you're not going to have healthcare. You're not going to have paid leave. I don't have, my vacations are not paid. When I don't work, I can't charge the clients, right? So there's a lot of things that you need to consider on that hourly fee. And make sure you also compare that to, other freelancers. So you can check on Upwork. You can check on Glassdoor, I think, as well, how much you should charge. And then the third thing that I always recommend is having a retainer. So depending, and you can always negotiate and discuss that with the client, but how can you put together a plan for the client where you secure a monthly retainer? So you know that you're going to have X amount of hours or X amount per month for sure, and for 3, 6 months, a year or two. It depends on how you do that with the client and what are the clauses on the contract. But in terms of like defining your rate, I think I will definitely check your current salary, expenses, future expenses, also being unemployed in the future, because when you're a freelancer, you need to consider all that, and then check, competition. How are other freelancers? How much are they going to charge as well? I don't know if I answered your question.
You did. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
There is another question, if you can see, or maybe only myself I can see it. You may answer this earlier, which I might miss. I start my startup agency with a small team. How do I get more leads in Salesforce and other freelancing sites, social media groups? I just want, before Anna, Laura reply, just a very quick saying that about referrals. If you guys want to refer someone inside the network, you can just write me, for example, and I will give you contacts inside the network. But if for yourself, for example, you are looking also, you feel that you're struggling, you have difficulties also to launch really your agency. So just write me, and I will also try to help you organize maybe webinar, or also to find referrals for yourself. So yeah, that's just a very, very quick answer, and then Anna Laura will reply as well. How you get more leads?
I think that's a good question, and it's related to what we were talking before. But I think sometimes it feels like you're like, where do I start, or do I just send a message on LinkedIn to someone, or how do I do this? So I think social proof is really important. Having an updated sales deck might help. So when you reach out to people, I think just referrals, asking your clients, or on LinkedIn, like creating a lot of content also helps. But it's kind of like challenging. I think also partnering with companies that are doing something similar is really good, because you can organize a hosted webinar. You can organize, you can write a blog post or do a study together with them as well. So these are all ideas and things that I'm trying to implement as well. There's different routes. I think it's being consistent is super important, and then also making sure you're on top of mind with your content as well, so that people know what you're up to.
Also, other thing which I noticed with people who sometimes I receive messages like, I can't get freelance contracts, or I can get leads. And also I also faced this problem before, and I continue also to struggle, especially for remote work. What you mentioned, that's a niche, because Anna Laura, she decided to have a niche. And I remember last year I worked with one agency in France, and they didn't have their clear positioning. So they struggle also to find. So, and once we really did the research on the market, so there are a lot of different companies, but someone doing, for example, CPQ, on someone doing, Marketing Cloud. Now we have someone that specializes on Marketing Cloud. And when you are trying to do everything, so it's difficult, especially at the beginning, to, for people to understand what you're doing. So you send I'm Salesforce integrator or something, but since there are so many competition, and for clients, especially when you're small and he wants to have something really specific, it's important also to be quite specific at the beginning, at least.
Definitely, yeah. I think that's true. It's hard to understand exactly because it's taking risks as well. It's like, okay, I'm just putting all of my efforts in one thing. This might rather work, But I think working on that positioning, working on that, and reworking on it. You need to constantly refresh that. You need to constantly review that, constantly update your website on your sales materials, and be flexible enough to see, okay, this is the route I decided to take. Well, perhaps this is not working, I might need to adapt. But being kind of like focused on one thing and showing that to your client and what's your area of expertise is super important, so that people know exactly, you have the experience, you have clients and people that trust you, and you're an expert on your field, so people will want to hire you in that sense. So yeah, I completely agree with you, Rodina.
Okay. Any other questions?
Anna, one quick question. Would you recommend, or do you think it's possible to avoid that leap of faith to first start combining freelancer services with your current job?
If the question is like, if I think that's like, if that can be avoided, right? If you can avoid the freelancing, like the side hustle while you're working freelancing as well.
Right, exactly. So as not to leave my job to start freelancing, and before that start freelancing, and see if I actually get clients and so on.
That's a very good question. I don't know. I didn't do that. So I started like freelancing when I just like stopped working, right? I think it's possible. I think it's really hard to do both things. But on the other hand, I think being able to freelance when you do have a job, first of all, it's amazing because you have your monthly income and you're freelancing, you're learning. So you kind of like can avoid, that period when you're like, okay, what am I focusing on? Because you do have a job, so you can freelance a little bit on the side. I think it's really hard though. And I think you can definitely avoid it if you have the time and the resources to sustain that in a way. But it's definitely, I think it's a good question. I don't know if anyone here has done both at the same time. I think I know people that do it for sure, and it works for them. I think it is beneficial in the sense that you can do a lot of trial and error, and you can set up your own business with that financial security at the same time. Assuming that there's no legal clause on your contract with your employer that that doesn't allow you to freelance on the side. But yeah, I think it's completely like both ways are completely doable in terms of like time and everything. I think it's more like a matter of like, how do you allocate time? Yeah, English is saying it becomes with 24/7 job and no time for family. True. So yeah, I think what I can definitely say is like when you make a decision and you're like, okay, I'm going to do it, you have a need, and it's kind of like touching on your own pride. You want to make it work, so you'll work a lot to make it happen. So if you don't have a job and you're like, okay, I'm going to launch my own business and I'm going to do it, you kind of like put a lot more effort. Whether it's like when you have a full-time job and you're freelancing on the side, it's like the side hustle, like as the term says, and you're not putting a lot of effort into it. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
I just also wanted to add something because I was a freelancer in Paris and it worked very, very well. And then I started to do freelancing remotely, and it became much harder to get clients, contacts. And since I was in Pardot but on Salesforce, it was very, very complicated. And I remember that I quit my job at that moment, and I was saying, wow, I shouldn't do this, because first time it worked, but for the second time it didn't work. But maybe now, like with this experience, if you have to work, have your job, and also doing freelancing, maybe your offer or something doesn't work enough well, because the objective is to have a client which allow you to decide to jump, because you can't continue to do this, and you won't be how to say, productive enough. So whether you will finish by don't have your job anymore because your employer will see that you're not productive anymore, whether your project won't be enough productive. So that's complicated. Maybe it's better to spend this time to prepare a good proposition, and to get clients, to search clients, but to also to fix your price enough to allow you to make this jump, because otherwise it's very, very hard, and you will finish this just by burnout maybe one day. That's my point of view.
Yeah, it's completely true. And it depends again on also like your where you're focusing on and which industry you're focusing your efforts. The Salesforce industry is huge. It's super big. The amount of apps that are created around the Salesforce ecosystem, there's tons of opportunities, and you don't necessarily need to have experience like working, like a lot of experience working with Salesforce to end up like working in the Salesforce industry. So I think if I was taking that direction, I'll probably just like finish my work and like focus on the new project. But yeah, it is completely challenging, especially if you need like, you know, if you it's a big kind of like step, and you know, it's risky, and also it's kind of like for some people it's not affordable. So yeah. Good. Any other questions?
I do have another one, hopefully a quick one. When you were talking about contracts with your clients or your services, how did you navigate that? Did you consult with a law firm, or did you just draft that contract yourself with the help of the internet? How did that work?
That's a great question. So I have to say that the first contracts, I drafted them myself. Actually, I think most of my contracts. I should have actually added that to the slides. It's super important to be super specific on contracts, to set the right expectations. There's so many things that that you need to make sure you add there. You communicate it on the kind of like discussion with the client and the proposal, but also in terms of like having that documented. In terms of the legal implications, I have a lot of clients that will send them, themselves, they will send me a contract and an NDA. So a legal document that says, you know, you cannot use the internal information, you cannot do this or that. But some of them are really not informal. Some of them, I need to chase them to sign the contract. So, I have templates, and there are a lot of templates online, so I can share them with you. But the contracts I have are really I draft them. I also found a tool online that it creates like NDAs. So if you need to have a very kind of like much like a legal contract, you can pay. I think it's not very expensive, so you pay like 20 something euros per year. And you can have that tool to create you the kind of like legal contract based on the country that you're signing with the client. And I think that that's kind of like very good because you do need that kind of like legal documentation. In terms of payments, if you want to make sure, you know, and it's a new client, you don't know them very well, and it's not coming through a referral, a lot of people do a 50% upfront. So before you start the contract, you get paid 50%. And then once you're done with the project, you get the remaining 50%. A lot of people do it, and it's kind of like something that a lot of people recommend, that if you don't know the person that you're going to work for, it's very important to do that, especially when you work in like the creative industry, design, and so forth. So yeah. That's how I did it. Good. Okay. Any other questions? Or anyone that wants to share any other kind of like recommendation that I haven't really covered? All right. I'm happy to share more like later or send the tools that I mentioned also via email. I can share that LinkedIn URL where you can download all your personal data as well. So yeah, feel free to send me an email, and then we can follow up via email or connect on a separate call.
Yeah, thank you very much, Anna, and thank you all also for your participation. And yeah, if you have any questions or need help to launch your agency, freelance work, not work, go and find your clients actually. So don't hesitate to write me, and we will think together maybe to find a solution to do something to help each other.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for joining. It was really good to have you all online. And yeah, we'll talk soon. Thank you so much, Alina, for hosting this.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.